start with traveling. So, like, we have been working together since December on this personal development and travel project that we're developing. So that's very interesting, and we will get into that. But like, I want to start with like by talking about our personal experiences traveling, and in your case specifically, like I remember you once shared in one of our meetings about your experience as not sure if you were like 20 years old when you went to Cambodia. I think that that was a country that you went
Yeah,
to.
yeah. Myanmar,
Myanmar,
and
Myanmar.
yeah.
Uh-huh. I would like you to get into like that experience, like share the story of how that trip happened, like key memories from the trip, key moments of awe and amazement that you
Yep.
have. So like, yeah, just dive into these.
Sure, sure. So I guess I've been doing some personal journaling on this recently, kind of
Mm,
fits with what you and I have been working on, and I found myself um, reflecting on the fact that for my whole life I always wanted to see around the corner. Like if I go
mm,
on a hike, I want to go to that next hill. I want to
mm,
see over the hill.
mm,
If there's a bend in the road, I'm not satisfied till I go around the bend in the road.
uh-huh.
Drives my wife crazy when we go anywhere because I always want to see like the next thing.
Uh-huh,
um,
uh-huh.
so, and that applies to like all the travel I've done. You know, I've always wanted to go across the oceans. I've always wanted to go
Mm,
across continents.
mm,
So, and my parents were good about that. My parents, we traveled quite a bit when I was younger. Um,
mm,
a lot of car trips. We traveled internationally when I was in elementary school. We went to England and Wales.
mm,
Real influential trip on me.
mm,
To go to those kind of places. Um, and I just always traveled. So when I got to college age, I took a year and studied abroad for 5 months, and then traveled for another 5 months.
mm. When you were studying, so was it like one of these courses before university, or what was it?
No, it was my sophomore year, my second year in university.
Ah, okay, 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 okay. So you started one semester and then the other semester you went to Myanmar.
No, no, no. The Myanmar trip doesn't happen until my 30s. So I,
Oh,
spent,
okay,
I,
okay.
I studied. I studied. I don't think we've talked about this. I studied in London for 5 months.
Hmm.
And
No, we haven't talked about this.
yeah,
Ah.
it was a program with my university, Florida State University. It was also connected to the London School of Economics,
Hmm.
and so we studied. It was really 3 days a week program,
Hmm.
and then the other 4 days you could stay in London or you could go wherever you wanted to. And so I spent a
Hmm.
lot of time hitchhiking around England.
Uh-huh.
And when that program got done, I went on the road and I just traveled Western and Eastern Europe for 5 months.
Hmm. Which were like countries that struck you at the time, like especially like the cultural differences with the United States.
Yeah, yeah. The biggest contrast in some of my best stories were around when I went to the Eastern Bloc. This is 1981, and so
Hmm.
so the Eastern Europe was still a closed society. It was still
Hmm.
communist. The Berlin Wall was up, and you required a visa to travel into these countries. And so I applied to get into a number of countries, and I got my permit to go into Hungary.
Hmm.
And so I traveled all across Hungary for a couple weeks. And the punchline of that story is I ended up in Hungarian jail. I ended up with my visa being canceled and escorted out of the country. So
Where did that happen?
um, it was in a town called Eger, which
Hmm.
is famous by my studies before I went there because of the Roman ruins
Hmm.
that were there. What I didn't know, it was actually the largest Russian military base in the country as well.
Oh. Uh-huh.
I didn't know that. And so
So, uh-huh.
yeah, I'm staying with a girl at her home there in the eastern part of Hungary. And about midnight one night, the local police and the Russian military police um, woke us all up, and I ended up in Russian jail, in Hungarian jail.
How long were you there? Like just for a few hours or
Yeah,
days
yeah, yeah.
or?
Just until the morning.
Mm-hmm.
as they had come into the it was truly a cell. I mean, there were bars and all kinds of stuff.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and they would come in and talk to me in Hungarian because the Russians left and left me with the Hungarians, and
Mm-hmm.
I had just nothing processed until about 6 a.m. when I realized what they wanted was money.
Mm-hmm.
So when they left out of the cell, I took my money belt off because they'd taken everything else, but I had my money belt with the money hidden,
Uh-huh.
$100 US, and that after I gave them the $100 US, I was gone in about 30 minutes after that.
Oh, you were gonna out of the country or out of the cell?
They out of the cell. They took me to the train station. They took me back to the house I had been staying. I got my belongings. They took me to the train station, and had a guard take me all the way to the border with Austria, and
Uh-huh.
it made me leave.
Before you realized that they wanted money, what were like the thoughts that came to your mind? Like maybe like fear or
Oh
like
yeah,
I don't know, confusion. How was it?
all those things were extremely confusing because
Mm-hmm.
I had thought that I had done everything right in terms of checking into the town with the town authorities. I had showed my passport, then let them know that I was there, and it wasn't really until I even got older that I realized what it was more of a shakedown than it was anything
Mm-hmm.
else. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Oh, but
Yeah, that's interesting. Like I shared with you that I had it was not a similar experience in the sense that I got arrested or anything. I just got like I had a problem in migration in Munich in Germany, but I was there for like 5 6 hours, not, and I wasn't like in a cell or anything. Like it was much of a smaller problem. But yeah, you shared this with me, and I remember you said that you had like this problem with well in that country, and that you had something similar happen to you in another one.
yeah, exactly. Now go forward in time about 10, 11 years, and I was traveling to Asia. Um,
Uh,
I At this point in my life, I had become a travel agency entrepreneur, and
mm-hmm,
I had opened up with my business partner the first travel superstore that's ever developed. And
mm-hmm,
so we had a company, and we were a full service travel agency. We were a luggage store, map store, travel accessory. We were a learning center teaching languages and travel skills and ideas. Um, and we did this in about 10 to 15,000 square feet of space.
mm-hmm,
Uh, it was at the time for a while, it was very successful and very, we were in the spotlight a lot because it was so innovative.
mm-hmm,
And so this is around that time frame, and I traveled to Thailand to speak at the World Travel Agency Conference.
mm-hmm. Was it in Bangkok or
In
where?
Bangkok. Yeah,
Uh-huh,
yeah.
uh-huh,
So that was a whole experience to itself. But because I had traveled for this convention, I was able to secure a visa into the country of Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, and some people still refer to it as Burma, but Myanmar.
mm-hmm,
And it had not yet gone through its democratic period. A few years later, this is the mid '90s. A few years later, it had gone through a democratic changeover for a period of time. But this
mm-hmm,
is still a close society. They only issued about 200 to 300 visas a year into the country.
mm-hmm,
Had done that for almost 25 to 30 years. So the people there where I traveled, had very rarely seen Westerners.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So when I landed I had made my reservations at a hotel. When I landed into the country, got a taxi, went to my hotel. I was greeted at the hotel by military police.
Oh. Uh-huh,
Um, they took me to their form of it was a police station. I wasn't
uh-huh,
behind bars, but I was told
uh-huh,
I couldn't leave. And once again,
uh-huh,
that's what was going on. But remembering my experience in Hungary, I realized that they just probably wanted something out of me, and
uh-huh,
and got to a captain, and just kind of the English is because they were a British protectorate, British colony for a period of time.
mm-hmm,
There's some English spoken, and essentially they didn't want me to stay at the hotel I was staying at. He wanted me to stay at his family member's hotel.
Oh,
So
where was it?
it was right there in the the city, the capital city, which is used to be called Rangoon, is called Yangon now. And so I paid what in this country would have been an extraordinarily high price of about $40 a day, which would maybe 10 times more than I should have paid, but it was just at $40. So once we got that worked out, I was in my hotel room, and actually from then on, I got very well connected with the military in the country, for the most part, um, and took some advantages. I was followed around by the police in the different cities where I was, so I had someone watching me, and I had incidences where they tried to see if I would commit any crimes. I was offered drugs and girls, and because they wanted to see if they could entrap me. But so it was amazing experience. I've never felt more alien um, than I did when I was in that country, because I was the only Westerner in a town of 3 million people. Yeah, and it just amazing.
How do you think about this when you like reflecting on this experiences? How do you think about them through the lens of what we are currently doing? So like through the lens of the experience of awe and being amazed and like having this um, energy that like can create transformation. Like for example, the this trip influence in any way what you were doing with the superstores, with the travel superstores?
Um, Yes, it did. I mean, it was core to that. I mean, I gave a lot of speeches over the years since I've done that about that trip, because many people were curious what that country was like because it hadn't been open. So I saw things that and took photographs and went places that people hadn't been, even travel writers hadn't been in a long. Um, and so as you and I have talked about this sense of wonder and awe in a location, it was incredibly powerful in this place. Um, I was in an area called the Plains of Bagan, Bagan. It's partly where we get the term in the West of pagan, Pagan. So and it was an area conquered by Genghis Khan in the 1100s, 1200s. I may not have that time frame exactly right without referencing it again, but he had conquered that area where there was thousands of religious sites, and it had never sufficiently been repopulated again because it was believed to have been cursed. Um, the British came in the 17 and 1800s and stole practically everything, right, as the British did around the world. But this location just I, I mean, it was really my most powerful up to that point in my life. One of my most powerful feelings of there's something else going on here than just being a beautiful place. There was just to get up in the morning and see the sunrise over these places with thousands of what's called stupas, these religious temples. No exaggeration, thousand in the area, and and you just felt it. You're like, there's something going on here. And I have a number of other stories about the people that I met in the area and the conversations I had. Um, I'll add on to that while that was a Buddhist area, still in that region there was a more ancient religion that had been maintained, called the Nat religion, Nat. And I climbed up 777 stairs to the top of a mountain of their most religious site, and that was yeah, that was another just stunning experience in that place.
Have you ever done something similar, like in another country, maybe somewhere I don't know, South America, another like religious sacred
Uh,
site?
I think the closest to that for me comes in my travels to Ireland. The western side of Ireland is famous and has a lot of documentation to what's referred to as ley lines, Ley, ley lines, and these are thought to be connections around the world where spiritual sites follow a pattern and are connected to each other and connected into the earth. And in those locations, it's said, and my own experience tells me it to be true, that there's also a spiritual energy in that place. Um,
Mm-hmm.
this idea of the stone circles, you'll see them in sites in Ireland and England and Scotland, where there is some sacred geometry of the organization of the stones in the ground. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, those are special places as well.
As we have been also like working on these ideas and on like finding ways where we can like get these ideas into something practical. One of the things that I have been like currently thinking about is how this could be integrated into existing paths or like journeys like El Camino de Santiago or these places around the world. I want to like give some like bigger overview of what we're doing to people listening so that they can have like more context on like
Sure.
these ideas that we were talking about, so ley
Yep.
lines and awe and connection. So I would like you to get into like this philosophy of yours that we have been discussing over the weeks, and how like just slightly touch on how that has been influenced by your travels over the years.
No, that's good, and help me as we go through this. That if I get
Sure.
deep or jump in and give your own perspective on it, because you and I have
Cool. Mm.
collaborated on these ideas, and it's been really helpful to me to have you as a partner in this. As we've talked it through, I think we've made a good team to
Yep.
form these ideas. And so, in short, and I'll begin by saying most of these ideas don't start with me. They're just things that I have read about and spoken to other people about and been influenced by others, but brought my own knowing that these things are to be true. Um, and so we've been really working on this idea that a fundamental reality of the way the world works is by having connections to others, connections to the earth, and connections within ourselves. And
Mm.
so those forms of connection are foundational and fundamental to the way the world works. And second, the ability that we have as humans with our consciousness that then reflect on the connections we have enriches them and brings them into something that's actionable. So in my philosophy, I rest on two processes, two things happening: a connection and a reflection. And that's expressed in many other ways in many other philosophies and schools of thought and religions. But for me, it's a shorthand to remind myself that when I wake up in the morning, that my day is going to be full of connections and my mindfulness to reflect on those things. And by doing that, I find my life is richer and broader and more meaningful because of that.
Yeah, with this, I want to get into the idea of conflection that we have also
Yep.
been discussing, which is like, the combination, the simultaneous combination of connection and reflection, which I think like the easiest way to explain it is through like the idea of an aha moment, which many times happens like in science, as we discussed, or sometimes like just in your daily life when you're just like when you just like suddenly realize how to solve a problem or how to manage something
Yep.
in your life. So I want you to dive into this idea of conflection, and specifically how connection and this part of mindful reflection happen simultaneously.
Yeah, exactly. So I think to anyone listening and you, if I've talked about, in our guts, we kind of know this thing that happens. That we you call it an aha moment, or it's that emergent quality where two things seem separate but they come together as a whole.
Mm.
And since there's a whole bunch of different ways to describe that, I wasn't satisfied with any of those ways, and so I made up a word, um, combining connection and reflection, because I think those are the two elements that come together when something new emerges out of it. So that's my word for conflection. You might call it both awe and wonder happening at the same time.
Mm.
You might say it's the removal of the duality. So when
Mm.
I see the heads of a coin and the tails of a coin, but then I realize it's all one coin, right? So taking parts, becoming whole. There is this moment that doesn't even seem like a moment. It happens so fast, and I've chosen
Mm.
to call that conflection, because sometimes you need a new word to get people to convey a new idea, and
With
that's
this,
go
no, no,
ahead.
yeah. So one short comment, like I see this happening a lot when you like speak different languages. That many times a way to express an idea is better put like in another language than in your own language or in the language that you're trying to use to communicate. And this happens like and with languages as Spanish, English, whatever, but also like I would even say like for example in coding languages that might happen as well. Like some things that you are better able to do with one coding language like Python than with another. So yeah, no, that's just one thought that came.
Yeah, no, no, I think that's really true. I'm envious. I'm envious of your ability to switch languages, and because not only do you have your native language Spanish, but you've also learned a lot of German, and so I'm envious of that ability because I've never really mastered another language. But I know what you mean. They're just things that make that seem to fit better in a certain language, and I think that's true of scientific language as well. I think I think there's just terminologies within science and ideas that make sense. Um, and so I'm gonna riff off of that idea for a minute to more explicate the
Sure.
idea of reflection. I've spent the last 6 or 7 years of my life in a scientific company. Be a CEO of a company who's got cutting edge science, and we've really worked in the area of plasma. And plasma is an emergent phenomenon, if we can use that word for a minute, of things emerging. And and it's got that work that I did in plasma sciences has led me to some of these ideas. And I'll be brief, but just to describe plasma, because here's a word that has two meanings in the English language. Sometimes it's referred to as blood plasma, but in this case, we're talking plasma as the fourth state of matter.
That happens in Spanish as well.
Does it? Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
you've got this lack of clarity when you say plasma. People don't know which way you're using it. But the way we're using it here is to talk about this state of matter. So the four states of matter. You've got a solid. Let's visualize that as ice. You have energy to it. Out of the ice emerges water. Add more energy, what emerges is steam. What add even more energy to that steam, it becomes a plasma. To me, that's not unlike the idea as we add energy to our connections and reflections, something new emerges, right? We've added energy to it, and that conflection moment. And in some ways, I see plasma being that same thing of adding the energy to the water and making steam as a moment of conflection when water turns to steam or steam turns to plasma.
One thing that we have been talking about in our calls as we have worked on these ideas is that awe or the experience of awe is like an entry point to have like extra energy to boost like these connections and reflections. How have you seen that happening in your trips, and how has that affected like your business career?
Yeah, so a couple different things. Let's stick to travel, and then we'll go back to the way that has happened in business. And so in my own personal travel, the and I think you should probably add in on as it's affected you as well. I think travel like the way you and I have done it with a backpack on, you know, and maybe it's not staying in all the nicest places and maybe skipping a few meals as you get from place to place. Not hardships, but I'm saying just not it's not a vacation. It's travel.
Uh-huh.
That when you sit on a mountainside and I'm imagining right now the only time I've ever seen a triple rainbow. And
I
I
have never seen one of those.
yeah, seen double, but this was a
Uh-huh.
triple. And I'm
Uh-huh.
sitting on the hillside over Loch Ness. The mythical place of the Loch Ness monster. And as that experience happens, and as I've spent the day talking to some people who truly believed in the Loch Ness monster, and other people who were skeptical, as I am about that specific thing, but but you sitting on a hillside at the end of the day, watching the mist and come over, and you just there's something that makes you want to go see around the next corner. Makes you put the backpack back on, go to the side of the road, put your thumb out. Whatever tiredness you had is gone. And I also think you have a clearer mind, and I think you then I'm telling you a story that to me that happened 50 something years ago, but I feel at this moment, because it's so accessible in my memory, it feels like it happened a minute ago. And so I think like that's that energy of awe and wonder. It moves you in the moment, and it stays with you throughout your life.
I also see this happening in my life with some moments. Well, for me personally, it has like while traveling, it has mostly been moments of like gratitude and like awareness and appreciation of like some moments of the trip. So like we have been discussing a lot, for example, like my experience in Bali last year, and from that, for example, one experience that I can like easily turn back to, and even in some way have or well, yeah, remember the feeling, is when I like my last day. My flight was at like 5 p.m., something like that, and I decided to go to the beach in the morning to like just swim for a bit, and then like go have some coffee. And so I went to the beach, and like the first thing that was like most striking was that this was a shore that I had been going to like very frequently in the previous weeks, but it always had low tide. But then I also most times went like around 4 or 6 p.m. But this time it was like 9 or 10 a.m. and the tide was like really high. Like the waves were like very different to anything that I had seen in that place. And like I even remember like in this beach you had like this big rocks that like you could use like to yeah, these big rocks whose shadow you could use like to just lay in the sand for a bit. But like in this morning I couldn't even see those rocks because the tide was like so high, and you could also like even see and feel the power of like the ocean like just hitting the rocks and like splashing. So that was one part, but then I found like another like part of that shore. It was like quite small, but it was a part where I was able like to just chill for a bit and just like enjoy the sea some more hours. And then after that, I went to have coffee at a place that I used to like. It's called Analog. And so then when I was heading back to my Airbnb to grab my things and go to the airport, I was like in the motorcycle ride that I usually took to like head back, and it was a very different moment compared to the other moments that I previously had, because like the other rides back to the place that I was staying in were like much calmer in some way, or at least my mind was just like focusing on what will I have for dinner, or what will I be doing tomorrow, or whatever. But like this time it was like, I don't know, it was a combination of like uh the surprise of going and watching like the tide be so different to what I thought it would be in the morning, and then having like my coffee at this place that I liked. Like that combination of things led me to like be in a very mindful and present state,
Mm-hmm.
which also like turned into like a lot of like gratitude and like excitement for what was happening, for what had happened, and what was going to be happening. And I remember like after that, I just started like writing down like some of my biggest takeaways from that trip in Bali, to like be able to record in some way those experiences and those takeaways, for me not to forget them once when I was in a situation where I wasn't like in that same state, if that makes sense.
No, very, very much does so, and I think that's what you and I are both trying to describe. And I don't think it's unique to you and I. I don't think it's but what I do believe is I believe this practice or this experience plus reflection has largely been forgotten as a fundamental aspect of being human. I think if you were to go back 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, when people in the spring planted a teeny seed in the ground and upsprung something they could eat 3 months later that tasted really good, you probably more often went, "Wow, what the heck is going on?" That's pretty cool, you know. And it didn't take them traveling around the world like you and I've been describing about. It was part of their everyday life. Or they woke up and the sun came up, they were alive again for another day, and it was beautiful. And that experience carried them through the rest of the day. I think in our culture, we have lost that connection with the earth or with the cosmos, or forgotten it. I don't think we lost it. I think it's still there, but we've forgotten it, and we have no regular practice to invoke that power and make use of it. And so, yeah, the work you and I are doing is just to find a way, and you and I are deciding how we're going to bring this idea to folks. But how do you help people remember? How do you remember that this is a real thing, and it's real because I can't put a scientific meter on it. There's no measuring device yet to do it, but the evidence is there that it has a reality to it. And I don't think you have to go around the world. I think you can go see a newborn baby. I think you can see the sunset or sunrise where you are, even if it's from the top of a building. I think you go to a park. I think you could talk to a friend over coffee. And if you're open to that connection and reflection, you can draw the same energy out of that experience.
One practice that I have been turning back to as we have been like doing this work is one that I read in this book called A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. I'm not sure if we've brought up that book, but yeah, like
I like Eckhart. Yeah.
yeah. So there's a part where he shares like a meditation practice that is about like focusing on small things, like a flower, for example, and just like trying to be still and aware for like some minutes, like just watching the flower and like feeling it with your hands and like even smelling it. And I think that's in some way what we're trying to focus on with this part of like bringing this practical ways to experience awe and connection on a daily life basis without needing to be on the other side of the world in an impressive mountain with a like astonishing view or whatever. And one part of this is that like we have discussed how this happens a lot with these types of experiences where you're like positively amazed by what happens. But something you and I have discussed as well is like the other like not necessarily opposite of it, but the other side of this spectrum where you have like this maybe negative experiences happen, but where you still have some sort of experience of awe. I would like you to get into that and like, specifically like into the idea of the dissonances.
Yeah. So thanks for that. And because I think that's really important. I think it's easy and more comfortable for people in the concept of awe and wonder to talk about these mountaintop experiences. And I don't think it's any mistake that the idea that you go on the mountaintop is a raising up. But we need to talk about that other side. And I've been influenced by Carl Jung, the psychotherapist, and others in these ideas. And there's some terminology, and the philosophy isn't as important, but I'm going to use the terminology if people want to look it up and see, right? So those ideas of the mountaintop are often called the transcendentals, truth, beauty, and goodness. And I see that there's another side of that. If that's the top, there has to be a bottom. And the bottom is the dissonances. And these are those feelings that aren't as, they're not positive in a typical sense of thinking about it that way. But these are feelings that happen to us. It might be grief that also moves us. Moves us. My own experience. I have 3 children. My middle child, one of my sons, had cancer as a child. horrible experience, right? I mean, for him,
Mm-hmm.
but for us as parents, he was 7 years old at the time of diagnosis. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but the experience, I can truly say, was one of awe and wonder, not in the awe sense that so casually we say,
Mm-hmm.
but in the same way that, if your village was hit by lightning, you would be awed by the power and mystery of what's
Mm-hmm.
going on. So
Mm-hmm.
the whole mystery of, why does a kid get cancer? What can be done? How do you care for it? That the energy that comes out of that, because we could stay up for days if we needed to take care of them. Where does that energy come?
Mm-hmm.
It comes to that love and that awe. So it's that, and I think my wife and I got through it by being aware of that power that was given to us, even in that moment, of the power that
Mm-hmm.
it to get through the tough times. That's
Mm-hmm.
equally an energizing power, and one that I think there needs to be a message out there to people who may be struggling with things, that there is power in those moments as well to help you get through them.
Well, with this idea, the concept of like the overview effect comes to my mind because like we were discussing it like a few weeks ago, like that it's the experience that people who go to space have when they look at the Earth, and as I was reading about it, like some of them have this experience of it being like amazing and like even a peace bringing and like positive in the normal sense, but then also many people who experienced something similar but through another path, which was like we are destroying like this beautiful earth, or like there's a lot of inequality, and like they had this more negative, in more typical terms, a more negative experience, which led to something similar. And I think that like one of the key conclusions that we have had from our work is that like these experiences, whether positive or negative in the typical sense, contain this power and potential energy, as we used to discuss when we use the physics analogy. They have like the potential energy to create a change, to bring this yeah like this impact into other things. How, I think that this we haven't discussed in depth, but how do you think that these experiences of awe might lead to a change unconsciously? So for example, having something awful, like in the typical sense,
Yes.
happen, um, and then having that experience unconsciously affect your reality in and like relationships in other ways. How do you see that?
Yeah, I think what it does, I think those experiences help you bring things out of your unconscious into what would be called the light of awareness, right? That you're no longer
Mm-hmm.
unconscious. You're actually putting things on the table, and when you put things available to be examined and considered and reflected upon, then you can do the work of change.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the just pops in my head just to say that the example of if people who do yoga, and I do yoga, right? The minute you start to think about your breath, you can do something about it. Otherwise, it's happening 24/7,
Mm-hmm.
all the time, and you never give it a thought. But when the moment you decide that conflection moment of, I'm going to pay attention to my breath, you can you can begin to change yourself. You will take in more oxygen. You will slow down your heart rate. You will feel better. You
Mm-hmm.
will feel clearer. And so there is this, in all those moments when we bring things to our attention, we can then do it. We can do something with it. To do work, as with the physics analogy, right? To do work takes energy, and
Mm-hmm.
work, what we are doing is saying part of that energy is to recognize the awe and wonder of a moment, gives you the energy
Mm-hmm.
that work.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's like also like the retail part that we're trying to focus on, like being able to use that energy, to capture that energy, to have this work and practical things happen. And I remember you have mentioned many times that like many of these ideas you have like seen through the yoga lens. So I would like you like to share what your experience with yoga has been. So like, how do you get into it? Like, what types of yoga have you practiced?
Yeah, so a couple ways. The first is yoga, like you'd often think of it in a classroom, or in a studio with a teacher
Mm-hmm.
doing the physical exercises of yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And in that you get that bodily motion with the idea that you're supposed to be reflective of what's happening in your body, to make those connections of what's happening. And so there are, I don't know how many different versions of yoga there are, but the one
Mm-hmm.
that we do, my wife and I do most often, is called Hatha yoga, which is a
Mm-hmm.
series of bodily movements. But there are many other forms of yoga, and some of them almost include like a psychotherapy. And so I've worked with he wouldn't call himself a guru, but he's a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and that's in a yoga called Kashmir Shaivism, which is
Mm-hmm.
both a yoga and a philosophy. Um, and so that practice, which was really one of making connections and reflections,
Mm-hmm.
um, can involve some bodily work, but is mainly a yoga of the mind. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've done both those vectors of yoga.
Have you done any of these or any other type while traveling? Maybe when you were also in Asia?
No, I really, and those trips, I didn't have a yoga practice at the time, nor did I really understand the
Mm-hmm.
concepts well at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched people doing their morning, what I viewed at the time, exercises when they got up.
Uh-huh.
And I remember the morning I spent in Japan when I saw, I don't know, maybe 100 people, all at that point seem old to me, probably my age now. They seemed really, but they were out in the park doing their morning meditation,
Mm-hmm.
but I had no context to understand what that really meant. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I highly recommend a yoga practice, and
Yeah,
understanding the philosophy of it.
one friend of mine has been practicing. I'm not sure which type of yoga, but like yoga for like 4 years right now. He goes to like this place here in Mexico City called Ashram, I think. But I thought that Ashram was like the name of the place, but then I learned that it's like a type of place that exists in general. Like if you say, I'm not sure if it's this way. Correct me if I'm mistaken. But like if you say church and you have like and you imagine the concept of a church,
Yes,
the ashram is something like similar, like a concept of a place in this way.
that's right. That's right. Although it generally tends to be bigger than a building, and it's more like a maybe a small village of people who are organized around the leader or guru of that. And yeah, you would enjoy some of the books about the people. There was a large movement in the 1960s and 70s when a lot of those gurus came to the United States and began to influence the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And
I would no. Go ahead.
no, go that, but
No, no,
that
no.
vector at some point.
Okay, no, sure, because like yeah, now that you mentioned like these gurus that came to the United States, and then that they influenced like some part of the culture at the time. I would like you to dive into like I want to start getting into like your business experience and path because I have found it like really interesting and inspiring. And like when you were doing the travel superstores, like did you have any similar experience in this sense that like an external or a foreign um, group or ideology came into your country, so the states, and then influenced the culture, and you had to like perform a business shift or something like that?
I hear the question, but I'm going to steer you in a slightly different direction, for this. So very much my business career comes out of everything we've talked about here of wanting to do something new and emerge something new.
Uh-huh.
And I've been an entrepreneur since I was 11 years old and had a paper route, um, delivering papers to houses, and then I gathered all the neighborhood kids together and my brother and started a lawn service business, um,
Hmm.
and knocked on doors and mow the yards and trim the bushes. And so I've just always been an entrepreneur. And when I got out of graduate school, I got my master's in business administration, and I had a chance to go to work for big companies. But I turned down those offers because I was just motivated to be doing something that hadn't been done before. So I worked I was in Austin, Texas. I went to work with the first book superstore. Bookstores back, this is the 1980s, bookstores typically weren't bigger than 1,500 square feet. I'd have to think about how to do the meters. But they were small, and they didn't carry maybe more than maybe 5,000 titles. Maybe 5,000 titles. But the company that I worked for, Bookstop, built stores that were 10 and 15,000 square feet in size, so 5 to 10 times bigger, and the same number, we'd have 40,000 titles and 100,000 books in the store. So this idea, and superstores existed in other categories, but the idea was to borrow with this idea from electronics and other stores and then apply it to books. And in that, that company became Barnes & Noble, which would be a name that more people know, and the Barnes & Noble superstores. And so I went to New York City and started, was on the team to start Barnes & Noble superstores. So now we're books, but now we're even bigger books. The stores went from 15,000 square feet to as big as 70 and 80,000 square feet of bookstores.
Yeah, I remember like the first time I went to a Barnes and Noble store was 2019 maybe. And it like here in Mexico, like the biggest bookstore is called Gandhi. Like Mahatma Gandhi. So and they are big, but the Barnes and Noble store that I visited was like really maybe twice the size of the biggest Gandhi that I visited. So that was as well like interesting and astonishing at the point.
New York City you went to? I think you went to the Rockefeller Center store.
Yeah, when I was last year when I was in New York City, I went to that one and is that the one in the Fifth Avenue?
Yeah, Fifth Avenue in the 40s, right there where the NBC studio is.
Oh yeah, then I think I did go to that one.
Yeah, yeah. I did the grand opening at that store. The so to try to so as my career came, it was this idea of synthesizing things, and the bookstore is a good example of that. Then I'll get to the travel store, but when we built these stores that were incredibly impressive, 70 and 80,000 square feet, they didn't make any money. They were really cool. If you like books, they were a great place, but they were not economically viable. So we had to rethink the business model. We had to come up with ways to do that. And one of the things that we did, and almost every big bookstore has one now, but I, along with other people, wasn't solely my idea, but I helped lead the process, was to put the coffee stores, the Starbucks, inside Barnes and Noble, and to put couches in. We didn't have couches and seating, didn't exist. And we didn't have a membership program. And so this is an example we talked about the dissonances. When times are hard but you begin to take what you know and make connections and reflect on them, new ideas emerge. And so that's how Barnes & Noble end up having coffee stores and couches and membership programs. Not because everything was going great, but because they wasn't going great. So it made us, it was motivational. We had to innovate. We had to put new ideas together and emerge new ways of doing business.
I remember when I was in New York, you shared you shared like a brief version of this story, and it was with Starbucks, you said, right? That like the initial deal. Is it right now that way, like only with Starbucks, or do they have like more?
Starbucks is the only coffee company associated with Barnes & Noble still. Yep.
And that didn't exist before then, like having coffee shops in bookstores.
It existed maybe for a few small companies, but it didn't exist on a national scale. That's what I'm saying. I didn't invent the idea of putting a coffee shop in a bookstore, but putting a national coffee brand like Starbucks in a national bookstore brand and making it 1,500 square feet, yeah, all that was new.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was the first. the first time a Starbucks was inside another store.
How long had Starbucks been existing by that point?
I don't know this for sure. I'd have to go back and check myself, but I think maybe 4 or 5 years. It was only
Okay, so it was
it was
still
only
like.
toast. Yeah.
How did this then influence like later on your career as you were like starting your travel superstores? How did the experience in Barnes and Noble influence that business?
Um, the idea of combining things. So once again, the superstore idea, our book superstore, our travel superstore had all the different elements. It was a compilation of different businesses all under one roof. And in my experience at Barnes and Noble, just says you've got to constantly innovate to stay ahead. Um, and in the case of the travel superstore, it was a case where we didn't innovate fast enough, and it caused the company to fail. Not because we didn't try, but innovation's hard, and going fast is hard if you're not a big company. So that company um, fell apart when the booking engines, which are common today, I'm sure you book your tickets on whether it's Expedia or Travelocity or even one of the airline sites, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean, that just didn't exist. And so I worked on, and once again, I was not the lead. I was part of a team. We all did this together. We built a booking engine. We built maybe the first or one of the very first abilities to use a computer on your own as not as a professional, but as someone at home, book your airline ticket. Didn't exist on the internet. It happened all on the internet. And but as a little company, we weren't powerful enough to get that implemented. And so American Airlines took that beginnings. They did, once again, they didn't take everything we did exactly, but they took the roots of that, the beginnings of that, and they made travelocity.com out of it.
Yeah, I remember you shared that story but I thought it was like the superstores started like to be out of business and that then you had to sell like this search engine part. But then it was like some sort of integration into like the next company then.
Yeah, yeah. It became part of what happened. Part of what happened was that the partnership we had done with American Airlines, they took that idea and they invested more and more money into it and made it a reality. The big company was able to take that idea and bring it to that a small company couldn't do. And so that and after that, I ended up working for Travelocity for a few years.
Then I remember you said that like after that you changed your path into banking, and this is like one of the, as I was saying, like inspiring and intriguing parts of the like your story and your path that like inspire me and that I think can inspire people in many ways. Which is that like you, as you were sharing, like you have a background in accounting, right?
Yes.
So you have a background in that, but you have been like, well, you worked in Barnes and Noble, so it's retail and books, and then you changed completely into like traveling, and then into banking, then into the plasma company,
Yes.
and then also started like investing in other startups, and right now like the work that we're doing. So that, I mean, yeah, that's just like a comment of what I found very interesting. But like, how was this shift for you from like traveling into banking?
I, it's part of what I've encouraged you in, and I would encourage any other people. I think many people get locked in to a definition of who they are and what they can do. And I never wanted to be constrained by, being a bookseller. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to be someone who could synthesize ideas. And I never believed that I was constrained by what I had done previously. I wanted to reinvent myself and become what I wanted to be, my own agent as to what I wanted to do. So I just I didn't see that as a limit. So when I left the book business, I went in the travel agency business. I became a travel agent. I passed all the tests. I booked an airline ticket. It was a lot of hard work, but I, I don't think you need to be constrained by what you were previously. I think not, and yes, and in that case it didn't work. I mean, I went pretty much broke after. but when I when I had after that all failed, I went on to the next thing, and I decided that I would be a banker. I kind of landed. I had the opportunity to become a banker, and so I jumped to that. I learned that whole business of being a mortgage banker, and built another company that ended up being about $1.5 billion. So, and because I really believe that there are many skills that are fundamental and apply to every business, even if other people don't think they do. And so I wouldn't let people tell you you can't learn something. You know, yeah, I just
How important do you think like this part of self belief and self perception is to be able to like shift through these different stages?
yeah, I think we'll do two things. One is I think unless you have that self belief, it's very very difficult to do. I don't think you can do it unless you really truly in your gut know that believe that you can. So that level of confidence and willingness to work hard is critical. There's just no getting around it. There's no shortcuts. There's no magic formula. There is a there's a grind and work ethic that I believe just has to be done. Not that other people somehow don't seem to magically fall into it, because some people do. So, and the second thing is, even if you work hard, there is truly a piece of significant portion of luck of hitting it at the right time. I know many people smarter than me, probably worked harder even, and just hit the wrong business at the wrong time. you know, and stuff happens. That's what happened to my travel business. The business model no longer worked because changed the environment, not because we weren't smart and doing good things. So, so there's none of that is a guarantee, but I do think that if you're going to go down that path, you should expect to have a belief in yourself and work hard.
You know, this part of like luck being a factor that influences what ends up happening is interesting because I recently wrote an issue for my newsletter on the topic of like luck and like what we say are like ways to increase so to put it like luck because like for example my personal example with this is I have like my podcast back in 2020 to 2023, so that was the transformation journey, and with that I connected with Ryan Manion, and then last year when I wasn't working anymore in any projects or in any big projects, I was doing some freelancing every now and then, but it wasn't really like a big thing. But then like Ryan Manion, I received an email from him in which the he was like introducing us, and that then turned into a connection with you, and then that turned into like what I am currently doing on almost on a daily basis. So that's like an interesting part for me that it's like to create these chances of things that happen out of luck like this. One thing that can be done is to like try to increase your chances by like actually putting work out there, connecting with new people, developing the right skills and like way to work. But like what's your take on that topic?
Yeah, no, I think you're saying just the right things, and I think it's easy to come back on the same themes we've been talking about in what you just said. In that, how do you increase those chances of luck? It's because I had and you were building an underlying base of connections. You have that network of connections there that in of themselves are working for you during that time, right? You and I met not because I was connected to Ryan Manion, you were connected to Ryan Manion. I was connected to the book industry and, and my experiences in the book industry, even though Ryan and I met because we were both working in the scientific field, right? So, and he knew people I knew, and I knew people he knew because we both had extensive networks, both in our human connections and our intellectual connections. And I think actually we both had kept, you know him as well. To use an example of one of our connections that we share, is he's also has that same essence about himself. He's also probably a connected to the earth kind of person, and so and so I think, how do you increase your luck? I think it's by making that network of connections externally and internally. And what does it take to do that? It takes reflection. It takes you
Mm-hmm.
mindfully intending who you connect with, how you connect with them, how you maintain your connections is the reflective part of it. And it's about not just what you get out of it, but what you give to the network as well, which we're doing right
Mm-hmm.
now, right? You and I, you know,
Uh-huh.
we're connected and we are, you know, we are far apart in age, we're far apart in geography, but we're both sharing in our experiences that we're building our networks internally and externally. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the message of the work that we're doing. We want to remind people of, and it's cliche in some ways and it's simple, but I think the simple things work the best. So
Actually, the podcast that I recorded just before this one of the key takeaways or the last things that he said was that like he's a music producer, so he shared the story of how like his most famous song came just out of a moment of like trying things like at his home in his computer, and that simplicity led to like creative insight that then led to the song that then led to it being like his most famous song. So yeah, I do see like value in this part of like simplicity leading to insights and value. How well you mentioned that like yeah, one way to increase this network of connections or the way to do that is through like reflection. In your experience, like shifting from the travel industry into banking, how did that reflection process happen, even if it was a little unconscious at the time?
yeah, it was the connection that my fundamental skill set would apply in reflecting on that, right? So, and part of it's being a business person, so to speak, but the fundamentals of the travel business and the banking business are that you seek to help people improve their lives. You have a
Mm-hmm.
genuine interest in helping them. If it's because you want to get to, you know, if you're a travel agent, you want to help get someone in Kansas City to see their family before
Mm-hmm.
Easter.
Mm-hmm.
That's not different than wanting someone to get a loan so they can buy a house.
Mm-hmm.
The practical steps are wildly different. The fundamental value of wanting to work in the best interest in the customer and help someone out and being able to communicate your expert knowledge in that area to do so, those fundamentals are the same.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
The
the
not
technical
the
parts,
formula.
the
Yeah,
essence of
I was gonna call it like the formula, but I wouldn't say it's a formula. It's just like as you say, like the essence, the core from which these things are driven is what like leads to the shape being different. It's like getting back into the idea of experiencing it like in a negative situation or in a very positive and amazing and joyful event or trip. So like with this I want to get like into your experience going again from like almost going bankrupt uh with the travel business to how the process of like growing the banking business went. So could you dive into like that story?
um, you know, it is at first it's this idea of gratitude, right? I was thankful coming out of that to have a job, one
Uh-huh.
that one that I could take care of my family. We weren't living in a house at that point; we were living in an apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't own a home for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's being, you know, it's that sense of gratitude for what you have, and then working to build back up again
Mm-hmm.
and to put that time in I wasn't the boss when I started there. I was just another one of the workers. But over time,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I added my own values and input to the company and ended up becoming the CEO of the company and building it from there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, does that answer your question? I'm not sure I'm on the right thread for what you're thinking.
No, yeah, it goes that way, and like once you became the CEO, you kept growing the company until like you. Well, what happened with that one? Did you sell
We,
it
yeah, we
or?
sold it. We sold it. That once again, industry changed. There was a lot of
Mhm.
turmoil in the mortgage business, and so we moved that on to someone else. And then I had a second company in what's called the title insurance business. And my business partner and I shifted our attention from mortgage to the title insurance. And then we built that company up to be quite large. And that was the company we sold a few years ago.
Hmm. Then how was the shift to the next industry? So from banking into plasma. How
Yeah,
was that?
that was kind of something I always wanted to do. I always wanted to be in science. I was one of
Mm-hmm.
and so I love things that are new and interesting, as we've covered a few
Mm-hmm.
times, and
Mm-hmm.
so this was just do it. And that was a very hard transition because I'm not I'm not a trained scientist, but at this point I have my name on a few white papers and learned a
Mm-hmm.
whole bunch and we were a defense contractor, and so I had to learn the whole world of the military, U.S. military, which was both
Mm-hmm.
good and bad. And but once again, having that belief that you can do it and applying the lessons you'd learned previously are just the fundamental components of that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and having and enjoying what you do. That's the other thing. And not everyone can do that. I appreciate that. But if you can find things you're truly interested in and truly
Mm-hmm.
believe in, and I appreciate not everyone can do that in all circumstances all the time, but if you can, your days seem shorter and the energy is there for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest lessons for a business and for moving through projects that I have had from our work and our connection and what we have discussed is this part of like learning the different languages of different technicians. So we were talking about this regarding like engineers, for example, like having the scientific background and credibility to be able to speak their language as well as speaking the language of the people in marketing and in advertising and in accounting and those things. And you shared that like for you that was happening with accountants because you have like background and credibility in this, and that through your experience you were able to um, speak the language of other people.
It-
How,
yeah,
mhm.
that's a really important skill, and one that you and I talked about encouraging you in as well, because I think you've got that ability. But
uh,
that translation effect, and I've been talking to my own son about this recently because
uh,
he's that and trying to get his skill level up to and it is to be willing to spend some time learning engineering, some time
uh,
business, so that you can be that person in between is a really valuable resource
mhm.
to companies to have someone who can do both things, both and.
Hmm. And I remember that, like in your case, you have shared that that came to you just like through being a curious and like wanting to learn and like reading a lot of things when you were in Barnes and Noble. But like specifically in the situation of like starting or getting into this new company in this engineering and science sector, how did you like develop those skills in this other very different technical areas. So
Yeah,
yeah, science and engineering.
same thing. Going back to making connections, to asking questions, having saying, asking other people, how did you do it, and spending time with them and listening, right?
Mm-hmm,
And not that I absorbed all the right lessons, but really listening to what other people said their experience was, and then listening to what the customers needed to and in this case what we're talking about, it was going down to a naval shipyard and talking to people who had spent the day inside the bottom of a nuclear submarine
mm-hmm,
wearing a respirator, working with
mm-hmm,
chemicals,
uh-huh,
and doing really really hard work, and I just
uh-huh,
asked what what would it take to make this an easier job, you know
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and listen to that and seeing if you couldn't take the idea you had, their need, and put them together. But that I'm not sure. You've got to be willing to go and crawl inside the, I'll go
mm-hmm,
alongside the guy inside the tight space of a submarine hull and get
mm-hmm,
dirty and
mm-hmm,
and sweat and do
uh-huh,
those so that you have a chance to talk to that person. I mean, it's just
uh-huh. Yeah, well, that's like a really not extreme example, but like a really uh different and like I'm trying to remember the word that they use like in probability, like the outliers. You know, like the outlying um, data that you have.
Yeah,
Like that's an example of that I would put like in that category, because like many times it doesn't, or well, yeah, in many with many skills it doesn't really involve getting into these submarines in these like harsh conditions or whatever. It's just like, for example, what we're currently doing is like talking with people who have been traveling and asking them about like their experiences of awe, and then like how they have recorded those moments and how they have used these connections. But that's good. So yeah, it's basically a result of like getting your hands dirty and getting into like the field actually.
you're making a good point. I think it's where our work is just beginning to take off. Is this idea of listening, and asking, and listening, and getting your hands dirty as to, okay, yeah, we've got these great ideas, but practically, like yeah, but what? Because these ideas are only good if they actually do anything, right? And so you've got to intersect or connect with people, and we'll, as we explore this, we'll find out, do people want this experience, or I can't help but want to get into this idea that you and I've talked about. Do people want to be full of awe, or do they have some awe?
Some of
Right? But those questions.
you know, this will be some sort of shift from the conversation, but I want to get into this. I want you to dive into your perception and concept of like the awful, the awful, and the awesome.
Yeah, this is kind of fundamental to some of the things you and I've been working on. And once again, we talked earlier on about this new word of conflection, right? And saying there needs to be a word or a new way to do it, a new way to something that provides a new definition to something. And we've talking also about this cultural position of forgetting what we used to know. And so for most of history, when people use the word awful, they didn't mean something great. They meant the experience of awe that was fully impactful. So they called it, the word was awful, and what they meant,
Awful.
full of awe. And it could be something great, like the crop springing out from the ground, like we talked about, or it could be, oh no, the lightning just hit my village and wiped out my cousin. They would use the same word for both those things. In both those things, they would say that was awful. Not because it was negative or positive, but because the experience left them full of awe. In the modern culture, we don't say awful in that way, but we do say awesome in English. I don't know if Spanish has a similar translation, but
I don't think it does, because like I have been trying to think about how I would put these words in Spanish, but like there is no word. Yeah, it's not the same. Like I think in this specific sense of full of awe and some awe, it works that way only in English.
yeah, yeah. So I think our culture, and you can see it just in the search of the word on the internet, how often people use awful and use awesome. Awesome is used, I think I've looked it up, like 12 times more in literature than awful. And but to me, so many of the things that people describe as awesome are I mean, really neat experiences, but they don't contain that same level of energy. They just have some awe. So, and I can put this in words by experience I had just a couple of weeks ago going skiing. Um, when I ski, I like to go to the top of the mountain. Before I go down, I like to look at that view. I like to absorb the energy of the place. I like to see the trees and the light and the snow and everything that's there. Because to me, that allows me to be awful, full of awe. But my experiences, and I kind of did this with some intentionality of watch people come off the chairlift at the top of the mountain. They don't pause. They go right from the chairlift and immediately down the hill as fast as they can go. And that experience of going 40, 50 miles an hour ski, that is awesome. There's no doubt. No, that I mean it's good. If you can ski like that and bomb down the mountain going 50 miles an hour and not kill yourself, that's awesome. But it is but it doesn't contain the same energy, experience, and something you're going to take away I believe, as if you had noticed the trees and the sun and the snow and the other people, and you talked to other people on the lift and made connections, eh,
Hmm.
then the experience is awful.
Hmm. And I remember like you shared this reflection. I think it was in our last call, and one extra thing you said was like if the people who went down skiing had stopped to look for a moment, just like even if it was just like a few seconds and then going down, but if they had stopped, maybe like this whole trip and experience would have been more impactful to create a change or to bring energy that could be turned into work afterwards, like after the trip, not
It,
just be a moment that passes by.
exactly. I think it's short term versus long term. I think if you ask those people when they leave, they would say they had an awesome time on the trip. But
Mm-hmm.
I think those feelings end very quickly when they get back to their normal life.
Mm-hmm.
I do think if they had taken those moments on the mountains, I think if they had that experience and had more connection to the place and to what they were doing and to themselves, then that would carry over to their daily life, and then maybe they'd be able to extract that same awful experience in their day in day out
Mm-hmm.
life.
Yeah, with the little things from the day to day, as we were like discussing earlier in the conversation.
Yep, exactly. You're right. You would then pull that, and you would then have a practice. You'd have something that you learned to do on that trip, and then take
Mm-hmm.
it so it became a practice for your day in day out life.
Yeah, just like people sometimes learn how to cook something new on a trip, and then once they're home, they keep cooking it. Like it's something similar.
Yeah, and that's good. That's good. Or maybe they pick up a few words in the language.
Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now I would like to get into like how I mean it wasn't necessarily a transition because you were still working in this company on the science sector, but like how did the project that we are currently working on and that we have been like discussing of developing over the weeks and months, how did that initially came to your mind? Like what I remember you also shared that you were like talking about these ideas to some friends and that they encouraged you to actually like follow down this path into like creating a project or something like that. Like how what was the experience behind this?
Yeah, a couple things. One is, I effectively had a dream, which
Mm-hmm.
all kind of came together for me. And then when I was talking to some friends about it, and I've been influenced by this friend group who follows a philosopher by the name of Thomas Berry.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a book called The Great Work, and in his estimation, in his philosophy, that we're all called to um, do something, which he refers to as the something you pick being your great work,
Mm-hmm.
which to help others transform. I'm
Mm-hmm.
giving a shorthand description. Thomas Berry calls it to reinvent the human,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so because of my experience with those group of people, it made me want to say for myself, what do I believe? What do I think? How do I think that reinvention of the human would happen? And that's
Mm-hmm.
what you have been talking about. And that reinvention of the human is really the reflection and connection practices.
Mm-hmm.
And then my motivation for my career is not just to do that so it's a philosophy, but do it so it's something real.
And
And
that's also like part of the character and the yeah of the person that you have become, that you got used to like having these ideas turned into something, into a practical tool or vehicle or something that
yes,
can be used, not just into something abstract.
exactly. That if it's just abstract and it's a book with dust on it and these things that just seem not accessible to people, what's the point of it? If you
Mm-hmm.
come up with a good idea, you want to see it manifest
Mm-hmm.
itself. You want to see it in reality. So, and part of the connection you and I have is because I really think these messages are ones that your generation need to go forward with. I think these ideas will be better coming not from me but from people like you. I mean, I think it can start. with you and I, but I think ultimately it needs to spread to people who who are at the beginning, not at the end of their journey, or closer to the beginning.
Yeah, and with this, what I also believe and find like value or potential in is like the fact that younger people like me are more is malleable a word in English.
Yep, that's good.
Yeah,
Yep.
we're more malleable in the sense that we can adapt to new ideas, new ways of doing things, and like it might be more difficult to have other people who are already used to doing things a certain way to try to get them to record their experiences of awe to create a change. That might be, as we have discussing, like asking too much of them, but like of a younger person it might even be like some exciting new adventure or some exciting new thing to try.
Yes, I think that's right. Both that malleable sense or the openness to these ideas is there. Not to say that anyone at any age could do it, but I think if once again, it's now we're thinking like business people. What is the target market? What is the probability of success? Who, who who's most in need of the product that I seek to offer? And and then what format do they need that in? How do they absorb information? That's all these really interesting business ideas about how you apply that. And I think that's often not done um, in these kind of issues. I think a lot of times it ends up being some celebrity that takes an idea and puts their picture on the cover of the book, and then tries to drive it that way. Which can work, frankly, it can work. But I think there's other the way. I think you and I would continue to explore to make this network of connections that we talked about, this underlying set of connections, and watch it emerge from that.
One part of this I think is also like the in well yeah integrating technology as we have discussed, like using AI. Well, in our work each week we have like been using ChatGPT a lot to synthesize the ideas to come up
Mm-hmm.
with new ones, and we're also trying to like learn how we can use technology and AI to retail something that is practical with these
Yep.
ideas. How has the integration of technology looked for you over like the path that you have had? Because like you experienced like this shift with the travel superstores and Travelocity, and
Yeah.
right now with AI. So how has that been for you?
Yeah, but I kind of built my career to a great extent, especially early on, by adopting the new technologies. When I first started working coming out of graduate school, almost all the computer power was on a mainframe still. And the PC didn't exist. It was very just at the very beginning of it of personal computers. And but from the very beginning I adopted that technology. I worked on a spreadsheet before there was Excel and and versions on the original IBM PC. Michael Dell was an acquaintance of mine. I didn't know Michael Dell well, but I knew his fiance well, and so I was an early adopter of the PC, and it influenced how I was able to innovate in the business world because of that. And AI is the same way now. You go forward 40 years from now. I mean, it's stunning what can be done. I mean, it's stunning. But I think the work you and I are doing is possible to both use the technology but transform the person to use the technology better. Also, it'll be used for things that are awesome.
Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh.
I mean, right? AI is an awesome technology. I think you and I are
Uh-huh.
saying we like to make it an awful.
And
We
awful
make
technology. Uh-huh. Or have awful uses to it.
Yes, yeah. I hate to use the same pun again, but I think it's helpful to draw the distinction between the ways that it could be used.
Yeah, I agree. You know, with this um yeah, with this ideas of like adapting to new technologies and learning new things, I would like to start like wrapping up all the things that we have been talking about.
Yep.
Like one of the things that I like to ask usually is like, what has been something that you have learned or discovered recently that you have found like interesting, entertaining, or just like valuable?
Ah,
It can be related to what we have been talking about, or like just in another topic. It doesn't matter.
I think the one that just recently I've learned about is just this idea of the ley lines. I
Mm-hmm.
was unfamiliar with that terminology, and
Mm-hmm.
just how extensive this idea of these sacred sites around the world is, but then the fact
Mm-hmm.
that they're connected, and just how much documentation there is around these ideas. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of intuitively knew it, and like we talked about, whether it's the plains of Bagan or the stone circles in Ireland. Yeah, I knew about those, but I hadn't realized just how extensive it is across the entire planet,
Mm-hmm.
uh, how much kind of evidence there is around it. So that's been a new
Mm-hmm.
idea that really that I think I would have dismissed as being too mystical or too magical to before, but now
Mm-hmm.
I put more value and credence in it nowadays.
Uh-huh. No, and like even not looking at it from a like mystical lens, it does make some sense, at least like academically, for example, to think about this geographical concept about how it's interesting that some places seem to be connected, at least like even geometrically. So that's
Yeah,
an interesting point to think about it like
yeah.
rationally.
Yeah, no, I think
Um,
it's definitely a rational way you can look at it, not have to buy into everything else. It
mhm.
can, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like out of curiosity. And then like I remember you actually bought a book on ley lines like a few weeks ago, and then
Yes.
like another question that I like to ask is like, what's like a book, a movie, a music album, like whatever that you have like recently been like consuming or discovered that you like enjoy. It can be that book or just another book or movie or whatever.
Ah, I read a lot. Let me. It's going to be hard to go through.
Hmm.
I can look over at my desk over here. So there's a philosopher, Irvin Laszlo,
Hmm.
Laszlo. Um,
Hmm.
I'll get the cover. Hold on.
Sure.
Um, can you,
Reconnecting to the source. Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah. Well, I I had written a lot of ideas down, and when I read this book, it's like, oh, that's what I've been trying to say
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
instantly. And he does a good job of that. So, of all the things I've read in the last month, that if you ask the question, that one struck me maybe as much as anything else. Yeah.
Cool. What's his name again?
Irvin, Ervin Laszlo, Laszlo.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
Yep.
And then one last thing is as I told you, like this podcast is called Coffee Lounge, and so yeah, did I share with you it's Coffee and Waste Lounge?
But no, I don't think so.
Okay, so yeah, it's basically like two little fun stories. So the first one is like the lounge part. I mean, this one isn't actually fun. The other one kind of is. But yeah, it's basically when I had my book blog. It was called the Reader Lounge, and then after that, I started like creating these small projects, even if they were just ideas for myself that I sometimes shared with friends, and all of them had like this word lounge, because like I liked and I like the idea of having like a signature to my projects and to the things that I do. And so that's just one
Yeah.
part. And then the coffee part is because this podcast does not really focus on one specific topic. So it's not about like personal development, and it's not about like music production, it's not about traveling, it's not about surfing or coffee or whatever. It's about all these things that I am personally, Emiliano, I am personally interested in, and that I want like to get into maybe right now, maybe in the near future, maybe sometime in the
Yeah.
far future. And so I was like, okay, what's one thing that I can use to describe like this personal approach that I have? And I was like, well, I can just use my name like Emiliano or whatever, but I didn't want to use that, so I was like trying to look for another word. And then like coffee is something that I have like liked for many years. I started drinking coffee when I was like 4 or 5. Not actually coffee. I started drinking like this milkshakes with flavors, and so my grandma used to give me this coffee milkshakes, which I enjoyed, and from there I started like actually enjoying actual coffee, and
Yeah.
so coffee has become for me over time like a personal thing, and I was like, okay, yeah, coffee lunch, why not? I enjoy it, and so with this context, one question that I like to ask is like, what is like your favorite coffee, either bean or like preparation or like method or whatever was like your favorite
Yep.
coffee type, and what's like a place that you enjoy drinking coffee at? It can be like a specific coffee shop, or maybe just a situation that you like to drink coffee during I don't know, reading, for example.
Yeah.
But yeah, like how
That's
does that look like for you?
an easy question for me. It's an easy question. I love coffee.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I drink coffee black.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like a medium to dark roast. Not too dark anymore. More
Mm-hmm.
and it's oftentimes I'll blend a medium and a dark roast together. I'll
Mm-hmm.
grind a dark that I like and a medium and put them together.
Uh-huh.
I'm too too partial on a particular bean, but I like a medium dark roast,
Mm-hmm.
and I like it out of the French press. And
Mm-hmm.
I would my happiest place is to drink that coffee sitting on my back porch looking at the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Oh, cool, cool, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. I actually like my French press a lot as well. It's one of the methods that I use the most. So like I use mostly either Italian mocha or French press. The thing is that French press is many times just easier because you just grind the coffee in hot water
Exactly.
and that's it. And the other one you have like to, it's more, there are more steps to it. So yeah. But yeah, I mean this has been a conversation I have been enjoying a lot.
Yeah.
And I mean, I enjoy a lot and value a lot, like talking with you each week, working on this project, and like, yeah, just developing and developing our connection and connecting further. But like, is there anything else you want to share? Any other topic that you want to
No,
dive into?
no, other than the reciprocal expression that how much I enjoy the connection and what we're working towards and knowing you and having this space together. So I'm looking forward to that continued place. And these conversations will continue, and I'm very excited to see what emerges out of all this. So no, it's terrific. I enjoyed the time together today.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on my show.